a power talk between the Right Honourable Sir Brandon Lewis, MP, who is the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on sovereign wealth funds.
So what can the government do to look at how we further develop infrastructure investment that we want to see here, both traditional legacy infrastructure, our road infrastructure, our rail infrastructure, but also the modern technology infrastructure we need to see to be competitive in the world of AI in a global economy.
Most of the sovereign wealth funds has become in today's world, they are activists, so they choose where they want to invest, where they don't want to invest. Yes, one of the biggest part is the London Stock Exchange itself, because UK has got an obligation to maintain the status as a LSG as one of the top stock exchanges in the world.
You know, I've written recently about, I found it quite frustrating to see the reaction from some politicians in the UK to sovereign wealth funds and investments in UK institutions. We're a free market economy. I'm a member of Parliament for a free market supporting party. If you are pro-free market, then you've got to embrace that and actually look at that globally. So we should be actually very keen about how we invest around the world with partners around the world, which also has a benefit to investments here in the UK. I was about to say good morning, but I think we're now just about technically good afternoon. It's a real pleasure for me to be able to join you as you sit here in this fantastic hall. And I just want to start off by thanking the Sovereign Wealth Fund Institute and actually me himself for bringing everybody together. I think one of the really important things that's coming out of an event like this is the opportunity for people to come together, not just look at best practice, but also raise the profile of sovereign wealth funds more generally, which is something we've been trying to do and I hope will continue with the all-party parliamentary group in Parliament in the period ahead. There is a huge importance for the UK, I think, with the sovereign wealth funds, and that's why I've been so pleased to be chairman of the all-party parliamentary group for a while. And for those of you who are not aware of what an APPG is, for those of us who've been around UK government for a while, we take these things for granted. Just to explain to you, an APPG is a body that comes together in Parliament of parliamentarians from both the House of Lords and the House of Commons and cross-party. So by definition, it has to have members of all parties involved in it. And it's parliamentarians who are interested in a particular topic. And we set up the all-party parliamentary group for sovereign wealth funds because we wanted to do some work to further educate and explain to parliamentarians about what sovereign wealth funds are and why they matter, and why we as UK government should be interested in, focused on and delivering with and for sovereign wealth funds. Both looking at why we want more sovereign wealth funds basing here in London, in the great city of London with all that it has to offer, but also convincing the government that it would be right for the UK government to set up and have a UK sovereign wealth fund. And a huge thank you goes to, I think some of you will have met last night, Alastair King, who here in the City of London and in the roles he's had and will have over the next 18 months has been really instrumental in pushing and supporting the drive for this across Parliament as well. I do think there is a lot of work for us to do. It's good that in the general election, if you haven't seen it already, we've already seen at least one of the parties starting to talk about the benefits and the importance of and their desire to see a UK government sovereign wealth fund. Arguably, we are some way obviously behind the curve, having not set up a sovereign wealth fund in the 70s when we had the North Sea oil opportunities to do that. And as somebody who represents, as a member of Parliament, a constituency that services the South North Sea, I know exactly what that has to offer the UK. We're now in a world where we're starting to look more and more at renewable energy and what that can do for UK energy security, but also UK energy offer more generally. As we're still looking at what can be done, and there are still explorations in certainly the South North Sea, with renewable energy, there is still the opportunity there. And in the UK already, government, across its wider platform with local government as well, does have the kind of funds that would warrant being treated, at least treated in the way that a sovereign wealth fund would be. I did 10 years as a government minister in a range of roles. One of the roles that I had very early on was in local government. And when I was looking at local government, one of the things that I found hugely frustrating, and we started to make some changes with, was the local government pension scheme. Now, as of today, and obviously figures will vary as you look around, but that can argue, you could look at that and see, if you look at the figures, it's got a market value of something in the region of £360 billion. One of the challenges with that fund is it is managed in about 94 different units, spread across the country with different levels of understanding and interest. In many places, the councillors themselves aren't even aware that they've got a local government pension scheme that they're responsible for, let alone the value of it to their local council. I was horrified once when a councillor came to see me to talk about his budget, and I asked him about his local government pension scheme and why he used the particular fund managers that he did. And he explained to me how brilliant they were. And when I pointed out he had the most expensive fund managers of any pension scheme in the country with the lowest returns, he laughed and said, but they do a good lunch and a great golf day. Now, whether they did or didn't do a good lunch and a good golf day is irrelevant to me. My point, and I think still holds, is having this move to a level and looking at how we structure funds here to be able to capitalise on them and get the benefit from them in a properly, professionally run way only happens when you get that critical mass that a sovereign wealth fund and the style of management that a sovereign wealth fund can bring to the table. And that was an example of where the UK government, I think, can be looking more at how it brings that together, to bring the real top expertise from around the world to the benefit of those funds, the benefit of the beneficiaries, but also the benefit of the UK and the global economy more generally, to make sure that the investments we're making are strong, sound investments. Here in the UK, as we move forward, there is a real issue around the fact that we've got GDP to debt at a very, very high level now. Many people, I suspect during this election, if their doorsteps, will be saying that they feel that they're pretty much at the level in terms of tax returns and tax that they're prepared to pay. So what can the government do to look at how we further develop infrastructure investment that we want to see here? Both traditional legacy infrastructure, our road infrastructure, our rail infrastructure, but also the modern technology infrastructure we need to see to be competitive in the world of AI in a global economy. And the Sovereign Wealth Fund, with the UK government leading on one, is one way to look at how we do that. And working with and encouraging more sovereign wealth funds to be based here in the City of London is part of that as well. Investing here in the UK and explaining about the opportunities and the offers that we have here in the UK and putting them together in a format that works and creating a regulatory and structural framework to make it encouraging for sovereign wealth funds to be here. The last job that I held in government in the Cabinet was as Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice. And I would just close with making a point that I made when I was in that role as well. There is a huge opportunity for us in the UK, and particularly actually in and around the City of London, with legal services. Because as we are seeing cyber, blockchain and the global economy grow, there is an opportunity for us to lead in the way that we did before. The majority of the world's legal contracts are done in and around English law. There is a huge amount of time spent in English courts on international contracts. We have got here in the UK a big opportunity that I think we and whoever is in government for the next few years should be looking to harness, because we have got that locus in the world. We've got the time zone point in the world. We've got the language. We've got the rule of law. There's a big opportunity for us as UK PLC to make the case to all of you and your colleagues beyond this room about why London is the place to base your sovereign wealth funds. And that's why I think it's great that you're here having this conference here in London. And I hope that my colleagues will be listening and understanding what's going on today to understand just how much opportunity there is for the UK and why we should be welcoming and actually opening our arms more to sovereign wealth funds to base in the UK and learning from what you do to be able to educate what we can do here in London and in UK government with sovereign wealth funds and for potentially our own sovereign wealth fund in the future. I think it's great that you're coming together. I hope you do take the opportunity over these few days to share best practice for those who are moving up and starting up and getting going, and also, as I say, to bend the ear of myself and my colleagues in the opportunities you get about why what you do matters globally and it matters to us here in the UK. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure speaking with you this morning, and I think I'm going to be quizzed for a few minutes with Lakshmi. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here today. Really appreciate your things. On the behalf of CBE, we would like to thank you for hosting us yesterday in the House of Commons in the Parliament. Thanks for handling the last moment of urgency. Really appreciate your help. So I would like to have some questions about the UK and UK sovereign wealth funds. So there's a lot of topics. UK has to have a sovereign wealth fund. Both UK and US as a nation, as a single, they don't have a sovereign wealth funds. Yeah, there are the multiple public funds, pension funds within the country. So what is your thought process? Should UK have a sovereign wealth fund?
Yes, no, absolutely. And two things. First of all, it was my pleasure to host in the House of Parliament yesterday. It was as I retire as an MP at 1 minute past midnight tomorrow night. And in fact, when I leave here, I've got one quick meeting and then I'm going up to my constituency to be there when they select my successor. So it was great. I'm delighted that the last thing I formally hosted in Parliament was for the sovereign wealth funds. That was great. And look, yes, as I was saying, I think we should have a sovereign wealth fund here. I always found it very, very frustrating in various roles across government when we were looking at how we invest in things, how we do things. Often people would get very, very excited about pension funds like Ontario Teachers or sovereign wealth funds that could get involved. And I was sitting there knowing full well that we've got several £100 billion worth of money across our own government pension schemes that we don't utilise in the same way. And if we have that capacity to create a UK-based sovereign wealth fund that can actually start to pick up some of that work, it's got to be a good thing to make sure that we're taking every opportunity to get our infrastructure right and have the right investment. And also, if we're saying, and the City of London Corporation absolutely is saying they want more sovereign wealth funds investing in the UK, basing here in London, my view, coming from a business background originally, and I'm working with investment funds at the moment, is when you're looking at what you do, you're looking at who your partners are. But if we want you in London, then we in London should be saying, come and partner with our sovereign wealth fund. Not, we don't have one, so can we have yours, please? You know, I think we've got to be honest with ourselves about that.
So how big a sovereign wealth fund of UK can be?
Well, I mean, just to give a litmus test, it depends how you structure it and where you bring the funds from. And obviously, we're playing somewhat behind the curve from as I said earlier, the 1970s, but certainly with our own North Sea oil and gas revenues. But even if you start off with the government, and one of the things I did do, I reformed the local government pension scheme and brought in common investment vehicles for that, which to me was a starting point to eventually merge it. But the resistance to merge it, I mean, if I'd have had my way, I'd have merged it back in 2013, and certainly by 2015. But the resistance was huge from both our civil service, but obviously from local government as well. And when you've got 360 billion sitting there, let alone if you look at all the other schemes that are out there, the sums are large that government can have influence over, take a decision on, and if it's got the courage, pass legislation to bring them into a structure that can do better for the beneficiaries, but also better for the economy as well.
I'm looking for a number.
These things change day by day, but I mean, we are talking, you know, if you get it right, and it depends how you structure it and what you do with some of the funds that are already there. If government is determined to do this and brings them together, you're in the hundreds of billions of pounds pretty quickly.
So they can easily do 500 billion?
I didn't say it was easy, but it can be done.
Okay, if at all, let's assuming UK is able to successfully do a sovereign wealth fund, where do you think they should invest that money, or what should be common? Because most of the sovereign wealth funds has become in today's world, they are activists. So they choose where do want to invest, where they don't want to invest. Yes, one of the biggest part is the London Stock Exchange itself, because UK has got an obligation to maintain the status as a LSG, as one of the top stock exchanges in the world. So that can create a huge liquidity in LSEG without any doubt. But beyond that, where do they should invest, and what do you think about that investment areas?
Yeah, I think in terms of where they invest, it's going to have to be, they're going to have to be quite brave. I mean, first of all, you've always got this duty to get a return, and I've always been very suspicious of, even in pension funds, as I say, through the government system, who take moral judgments over things that they can legally invest in, and actually you should be investing to get the best returns for the beneficiaries, etc. But in terms of, in a more macro sense, there will be, I think there's going to be a need to resist the urge that if we're setting up a UK government sovereign wealth fund, that all of that investment has to be in the UK. Obviously there is an opportunity there to use it to invest in infrastructure in the UK, and we should do that. But also we're going to have to resist the urge for it to be isolationist effectively, because at two levels. One is there are good opportunities around the world, and secondly, if we're saying to sovereign wealth funds, please invest in the UK, but by the way, we're not investing in your country, that doesn't work either. So we've got to look at how we get that spread right. And I suspect, you know, the reality is looking at where our good partners are around the world. And I think there's been, and look, we've seen, some of you will have seen, I've written recently about, I found it quite frustrating to see the reaction from some politicians in the UK to sovereign wealth funds and investments in UK institutions. We're a free market economy. I'm a member of Parliament for a free market supporting party. If you are pro-free market, then you've got to embrace that and actually look at that globally. So we should be actually very keen about how we invest around the world with partners around the world, which also has a benefit to investments here in the UK.
We will open the floor for 3 questions. Any questions? Anybody would like to raise a hand, please? Yeah, please. Can we have a mic? Yeah, it's coming, please.
Thank you very much for your kind remarks and very energetic
Please
support.
Introduce yourself, please.
Sorry, Andrew Rosenoff. I'm on the board of a Rwandan sovereign wealth fund currently, and I specialize in sovereign wealth funds for the last 20 years. My question is very simple. There's an entity in the UK called UK Government Investments. Technically, one could think of it as a proto-sovereign wealth fund. What are your thoughts about that entity? Is it feasible, do you think, to maybe form out of it a more arm's length, more independently governed, UK-focused, Temasek-style fund? Thank you.
Yes, I mean, none of these things are ever quite simple when you involve UK government. I mean, my experience has been, somebody was telling me the other day, I'm sure these figures aren't quite right, but when, something like 15 years ago, just over 15 years ago, there were 36 regulators and there's now over 90 in different forms. And if you take, I think there is an opportunity with that, but we've also got to look at, you know, there's various different UK government investment arms through the British Bank, etc. And actually there might be an argument at how you look at bringing all of this together in one structure, because again, what you don't want to do at a macro central government level is recreate what I'm complaining about has been there at local government level, where you've got this split into so many small funds, some of which are too small to really have any strong impact. So actually look at it in the round about what are all of these funds that government has any ability to control or direct influence over, and can we bring those in? Because if my view is, if you're going to do this, you make it as big and as strong as it can possibly be. Firstly, because then it's got the buying power, and it becomes like it was a few years ago, where if you're looking for inward investment from pension funds, everybody gets very excited about certain pension funds. That should be us, that should be the UK government. But also because when you get to a certain scale, you can attract the best and the brightest to come and run it for you. So you get away from having to do it on a shoestring, you can do it professionally. And this will be the other thing, coming back to my point around being brave enough to make what can be challenging, as a civil servant say, brave decisions for a minister around investing outside the UK with UK funds. It's also got to be brave around, if we want the best, we've got to pay the best and encourage the best in, rather than just using, I actually think we've got a brilliant civil service, but that's a different skill set. And we need to actually structure this in a way that we actually get the top professionals to get the top results for us.
Please.
So, excellent presentation. So, may I just ask, so if you're talking about nearly 300 billion sovereign wealth fund of United Kingdom, Great United Kingdom, wouldn't you think that that would be kind of a bona fide entry into the funding HS2? Because HS2 surely will save, not only advance UK's economy globally and exhibit one of the finest public transport modes in the UK, but most certainly will save us a lot of environment and newest innovative mode of public transport. So if you combine it with 300, like your funds and one of these funds from around the globe, you could make a very viable project for HS2. Thank you.
Well, yes. I mean, I'm going to be careful because although I'm not standing for Parliament this time, I still am a member of the Conservative Party and currently still a member of the government party. But if the benefit of having a fund of that type, if you have that structured in that way, it would allow, for example, the mayors of the West Midlands, if you take two people and of Manchester, Andy Burnham and Andy Street, as was obviously until a short while ago, but when the HS2 changes were announced, they were two people who obviously felt very strongly that the case should be carried on and it should go. Well, actually with this, they would be able to say, well, okay, if government's not going to fund it, actually we don't need government because we're talking to sovereign wealth funds, because we can show, as the mayors of our regions, that this has a return on capital that actually stacks up as the business case stacks up. So a sovereign wealth fund would give more opportunity rather than it just relying on a government that first of all is always going to have limited funds. That isn't going to change whoever's in government in the next period, but also a whole range of different demands at any given time. You know, over the last period of time, this government has been challenged with COVID, with Ukraine, with now the Middle East challenges. All of that has put a big drain on government funding and structure and ability to do things and led to what will be and have been tough decisions. A sovereign wealth fund obviously is in a different area, and once it's got those funds, it's all about investment. So it creates a different opportunity and a different angle for different areas to be able to pitch for infrastructure. So again, in theory, yes, is the short answer.
Any questions? So let me close this with the last question from my side. The APPG, what's the main agenda of the APPG?
Well, I think, and again, I want to thank historically Alastair King, as a huge credit is due to Alastair for working to get the APPG up and running with us a short while ago, and for the SWFI who are picking up the baton and going to take it forward. And I'll certainly be helping the team to ensure that in the new Parliament we get somebody to come in and set up that APPG, because it has to be parliamentarians. We want to get a good chairman. The two areas we were looking at, and I would like to think that an APPG going forward will want to continue to look at, is at one level, what do we need to get the UK government to do to create an environment in which more sovereign wealth funds base and invest here in the UK? That is part of it. And don't underestimate how much work there still is to do to educate parliamentarians about what a sovereign wealth fund is and why it matters and why it's good for the UK and the global economy. You know, parliamentarians come from all walks of life, and many of them have never heard of sovereign wealth funds. And the second point, which I think in the next Parliament will be arguably the bigger case to make and can have a big impact, is making the case with government and convincing government and getting cross-party support for a UK government sovereign wealth fund to be set up here in the UK by the UK government. And I think there is the space actually to get cross-party support for something like that the government can then deliver on. And if you get cross-party support, it's always going to be easier for a government to deliver on it.
Thank you, sir. We at CBE is committed to do everything possible to make UK as one of the sovereign wealth fund capitals of the world. We are committed to it. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just for a moment.